Baby steps.
After your faith hasn't let you down.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, a licensed therapist and certified life coach. And over the 13-year history of this podcast, we've shared a lot of listener essays, stories, reflections, and deeply personal explorations from you, the audience. And I've decided it's time to bring some of those voices back to life, to dust them off and, well, resurrect them. We'll call it the morning of the first resurrection. After all, resurrection is really about healing, restoring the body, mind, and soul to their most pristine, integrated state. So I thought, what if we could use modern tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM to create a kind of AI puppet show? A thoughtful, playful deep dive into the mental health layers underneath these listener essays. Now, I'm creating this series for two audiences, primarily. First, for students studying for the National Counselor exam to help you explore these stories as real-world case studies. And second, for anyone who's ever wrestled with similar experiences to help you see the psychological and emotional insights that might apply to your own life. So, it's my pleasure to share these resurrected essays with you, renewed, reimagined, and ready for reflection. All right? Are you ready?
Hang on to your hats and glasses, 'cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
The Atheist and the Humanist by
Betty.
The Atheist and the Humanist were fighting for the crown. The Atheist beat the Humanist, but then was feeling down. Arrogance is widespread, so try to pipe down and focus on understanding what's in another's crown. This is a story about finding the balance between your inner Randy Snyder and the other part of you who doesn't want to be a total asshole to the believers in your life. It's a story that starts with reconciling our past as people of faith with our current standing as staunch skeptics. So let's start at the beginning. Former Mormons, you know how this goes. One day you are weeping over the pulpit in Relief Society about how Sister Olson selflessly brought you tomato soup after you birthed another child. Now you are posting selfies on the ex-Mormon subreddit, toasting a glass of gin and tonic to your fellow heathens with glistening, bare, virgin shoulders on a church-free Sunday. You were all in, a righteous son or daughter of God, called to represent Jesus Christ in the 11th hour. Now look at you, getting drunk on the snark that drips from ex-Mormon forums and wallowing in the internet fallout of bad church PR. I went from goddess in training to a tattooed, coffee-drinking, social justice-pushing atheist. What the hell happened?
What the hell?
A crisis of faith, deconversion, a fall from grace, sleeping with Satan. Bottom line is, we don't believe anymore. The details of how it happened are complicated, to say the least. The poor soul who ever asked a recovering Mormon why they left the church. I have vomited my church-induced anger on a handful of people, and it's never pretty. We send out mass emails, we write the long Facebook posts, we write letters to our parents, spouses, and children. We try to legitimize our disbelief with loved ones so that they will accept us. And even if they don't leave the church themselves, at least they know why we did. The evolution from devout to disenchanted has a traceable path. To those of us who have gone through it, hearing another's journey of losing their faith rings painfully familiar. Sometimes the only place to commiserate and be free to express our anger is on the internet. So we share our experiences and the things that we have learned, and we find ourselves bonding with strangers. We learn we are not alone. We aren't crazy after all. The common experience goes something like this. A collection of doubts, guilt, and unanswered questions build up until a watershed moment roars out of us like a freight train. Somewhere along the way, we had our minds blown, and the universe looks a whole lot bigger. Like a spiritual experience, there has been a shift, and it feels profound. Monochrome to Technicolor, baby. We are reborn. The ex-Mormon moment is now. Over the last few years, we've crept out from the dark corners of the internet into a thriving public community. I don't want to spend time writing about why the church isn't true. That space has already been carved out. I want to think bigger. People are leaving their dead beliefs all over the place. It's bigger than leaving Mormonism. We are part of a broader world community of dissenters with eerily similar stories. Spend time chatting with other ex-Christians or even ex-Muslims and you instantly see the commonality. The religions that once set us apart are now bringing us together as we forsake them. Secularism, humanism, and atheism are more and more amalgamating into a broader platform that leads the world in advancing human rights, scientific discovery, earthly stewardship, and in my opinion, holds humans more ethically accountable than the religious world does. Yeah! But I want to think bigger still. The back and forth between the religious and secular communities is tiresome. There will always be bad ideas that need to be called into question, especially those that are so steeped in tradition that they often get a pass. But we also have to reach outside of our newfound secular circles. Can we find common ground with the believers in our lives to foster rational conversations and connect on a level that transcends our own moral truth? Or will we go from one flavor of dogma to another, isolating ourselves from anything that disagrees with us? There is often a conundrum in my head that goes something like this. Can I criticize religious ideology and still have meaningful relationships with religious individuals? Sometimes the Mormon Church really does make me mad. I keep a pulse on the happenings in the church, and I get angry about certain policies and doctrines that are damaging and hurtful. I get mad that members make excuses for institutionalized practices. By calling it church culture, it's dissed and yet still tolerated. I get mad that no one holds a higher standard to the men who claim to speak for God. I get mad that the church whitewashes its history to inaccurate levels of propaganda. I get mad that facts get coded as anti, therefore null. I get mad when members are complacent in social justice issues because everything outside of the gospel doesn't really matter. That's atheist me. But my husband is still a practicing Mormon. We do have a pretty awesome relationship. It's never been better, actually. We have worked out a good balance to accommodate both of our belief systems. We love to travel, be outdoors, explore the city, rock climb, ride bikes, roller skate, eat well, dance party, parent like nobody's bitches. Yeah! My parents and siblings are Mormon. I love them. I genuinely like being around these people. I couldn't live without my sisters and my awesome genius brother. My in-laws are Mormon. They love everyone they meet. They love me like a daughter. Their children are all down-to-earth, normal people. I love them all. I have an amazing group of Mormon friends where I live. They knew from day one I was an atheist, nay, an apostate. They don't care. We even talk about issues in the church from time to time. Most of the time we talk about birth-in and funny things our kids say while simultaneously breastfeeding and pushing a swing. Culturally, I am still very Mormon. I do have a spicy peppering of friends outside of Mormonism, but on the whole, my social network has vastly been Mormon my whole life until I moved out of Utah and left the church. The fact is, I enjoy the dialogue I have with people of faith. It helps me think about things differently. I don't like being surrounded by people who look just like me, think just like me, live just like me, beep, bop, boop, bop, beep. Ew, that's too robotic. I need a bouquet of people in my life, as much as authenticity can allow. This is Humanist me. I like to follow the ex-Muslim subreddit. It's eerily similar to the themes on the ex-Mormon subreddit. and the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and Black atheism. The stories of leaving one's religion are just as interesting as the religion itself. We are kindred spirits. My secular friends hold a special place in my heart. I listen to Sam Harris. I don't agree with everything he says, and oh my gosh, I can't meditate. Squirrel! Wait, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, hardcore atheists who publicly criticize bad ideas brought to you by religion. You know the scene: Richard Dawkins, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Lawrence Krauss, Majid Nawaz, and Black freethinkers, to name a few. I'm glad there are people out there having these conversations. All ideas, especially religious ones, should be up for scrutiny. Just because they are special to someone doesn't mean they are untouchable. Yeah! Atheist me. Just this weekend, I met a Muslim woman my age. She was wearing a hijab. Our kids were playing at the mall play place together. Her daughter was telling me about Moana and Maui. We got talking about library story time, our kids getting sick, and New York City. She's from Brooklyn and recommended some sites in Manhattan for next time we visit. She seemed like a cool, easygoing mom. I hope we bump into each other again to exchange contact info. I don't care one shit of a bird's brain case that she is wearing a hijab or that she is Muslim. Humanist me. Later that day, I'm scrolling Twitter, getting sucked into the hashtag #NoHijabDay movement of ex-Muslim women who unwrap and burn their hijab in defiance.
You go, girl.
Hell yeah, atheist me. Do you see the whiplash that is going on? I think it speaks to a broader problem that society has to learn to reconcile. There's online life where we speak freely, audaciously even. It's a place to get out the anger and frustration. We can be irreverent, sacrilegious, and laugh at things we once thought holy. Online, we can give a giant middle finger to what's wrong in the world. Then there's real life where we face people, not an ideology. I'm at least self-aware enough to realize the possibility of online sentiments disfiguring how I view people. The World Wide Web can be toxic. You have to constantly self-correct. If you aren't careful, you get sucked into the vitriol. There is a certain type of Mormon that I try not to be, and there's a certain type of atheist I try not to be either. Negative and judgmental. Unfortunately, social media brings that out in all of us. So what's the antidote to the venom of online echo chambers and pitchfork parties? Dialogue. Respectful, open-minded conversation. We have to work hard at fostering genuine relationships with people outside of our tribe. We have to leave our virtual sanctuaries and talk it out for realsies. Still be critical of bad ideas, but then take your passion off the screen and into something real. Stand up for inequality. Get involved in local politics. Challenge the status quo. Stay thirsty for knowledge. And teach our kids the values that we want to see in the world. While we do this, may we cultivate relationships with believers and non-believers alike, doing the dance of listening and explaining our positions. Progress is slow, but it doesn't happen when we build up walls. I used to view the world in more black and white terms, but now I'm seeing the gray and the red, blue, green, and neon pink. Humans are complicated creatures, and life is incredibly inspiring and sobering all at the same time. It can be overwhelming to take it all in, yet we stumble along, learning and growing into the person we want to be, intelligent, fearless, persistent, and loving. So I'll continue to learn about belief despite my agnosticism. I'll try to stay respectful even if I don't agree. I'll try to empathize with the meaning others find, and I'll always strive to see the good in people and the beauty in our human complexity. I'll try to use my skepticism for good. I know that atheism and humanism are not polar opposites. I know I can be both. I just worry that my search for truth will alienate me into a box. I don't do boxes. I do rainbows. In summary, I might not agree with you, but I love you. Let's go meet for coffee. Oh, you don't drink coffee? Well, you can get whatever you want. I'll be getting coffee.
That was a great old listener essay from Infants on Thrones, newly resurrected on the first morning of the Great Deconstruction to stand before the judgment bar of, well, maybe not a judgment bar, but perhaps the round table of inner reconciliation presented as an AI puppet show like you're hearing right now.
You better believe it. Welcome to the deep dive. That opening, Infants on Thrones, really sets the stage, doesn't it? It paints this picture of profound vulnerability. You know, stepping off that throne of certainty, that belief system you've always known, and you're left with this raw awareness, like an infant, really. It's quite an image for the kind of transition we're exploring today. We're diving into something incredibly complex, the whole psychological and actually physiological journey of spiritual transition. What happens when a faith that's been your bedrock just dissolves and you have to build a new identity basically from scratch? And this new identity isn't built on neat answers, but on paradox. It's not just about changing your mind. It's a deep, deep rewiring. Neurologically, existentially, we want to track the very real personal heartbreak involved. But we also need to look at the clinical side, you know, the theories, the diagnostic stuff, the ethics, the framework mental health professionals use to navigate this with people.
Exactly. Our mission today is sort of twofold. We're talking to those of you maybe going through your own shifts, trying to figure things out, but also for those studying clinical practice, maybe prepping for the NCE. We're taking one person's story, we're calling her Betty, and really distilling it. We want to pull out the core knowledge from her experience navigating this tension between, say, her skeptical intellect and her deep sense of human empathy. The goal is practical knowledge, understanding psychological flexibility, ethical care, and crucially, how the mind and body are totally intertwined in this kind of spiritual deconstruction. We're looking for a map, really. How do you get from that place of confusion and burnout to something like coherence?
Okay, so let's get into Betty's story. She gave us this fantastic little allegory for her own struggle. It's sharp, but also kind of sad, isn't it?
It really is.
The atheist and the humanist were fighting for the crown. The atheist beat the humanist, but then was feeling down. That just perfectly captures this internal split she's living with.
And this wasn't a minor shift for her. Betty was all in. Her words, a goddess in training. In her faith tradition, Latter-day Saint, her whole identity, her moral compass, her future, it was all tied up in that.
Right. So the external change looks quite dramatic. She jokes about it in, tattooed, coffee drinking, social justice pushing atheist.
Yeah, but that freedom, that visible change, it hides a massive internal cost.
It's such a common misunderstanding, isn't it? That leaving a really intense faith is just deciding something intellectually, but you're right, it's grief.
Profound grief. She's not just ditching some beliefs. She's mourning the loss of an entire architecture of meaning. That structure told her who she was, why things happen, her place in the cosmos. When that collapses, well, everything feels unstable. You have to rebuild on shaky ground.
And what defines her rebuilding process is this constant inner battle, this dialectic, you called it.
Exactly. Betty lives in these two worlds inside herself. There's the intellectual side, atheist me, fiercely critical, fueled by things she learned about history, ethical problems she saw. This part wants to, as she says, torch hypocrisy. It values logic, truth, above all else.
But if that was the whole story, she'd just be angry and alone.
Pretty much. And that's where humanist me comes in. This is the empathetic part, the part that sees the shared humanity, that craves connection, even with people she deeply disagrees with philosophically. This side gets that people hold beliefs for complex reasons, comfort, community, tradition. Even if the beliefs themselves seem illogical to her now, and the tension is just brutal, because both sides are deeply moral in their own way. One is loyal to intellectual honesty, the other to relational connection.
And her life circumstances just keep poking at this conflict, right? Married to someone still practicing, family and friends mostly still in the faith.
Constantly. Every social event, every family dinner requires her to consciously manage this internal war. It's exhausting.
And the irony you mentioned, finding similar kinds of rigidity in some secular or skeptic communities she explored.
Yeah, that was a sharp realization for her. Sometimes finding them as dogmatic as the faith she left, it forced her to think, okay, maybe the problem isn't just the belief system, but this human tendency towards needing certainty, towards drawing hard lines.
You can really hear the conflict in her own words. That fierce skeptic comes out when she talks about the institution. I get mad that the church whitewashes its history. That's the demand for truth.
But then, almost immediately, the humanist steps up. Like when she talks about encountering someone different, I don't care, one's of bird's brain case that she's wearing a hijab, humanist me. She's actively choosing empathy over categorization, fighting that urge to just dismiss.
And the goal, the peace she wants, seems summed up in that other quote about meeting for coffee.
Right. I might not agree with you, but I love you. Let's go meet for coffee. Oh, you don't drink coffee. Well, you can get whatever you want. And that holds both sides, doesn't it? The defiant freedom, the coffee, and the radical acceptance, the whatever you want.
That's the identity she's trying to forge. One strong enough, flexible enough to hold both critical thinking and unconditional love. That's a huge ask.
It is a huge ask. So let's pivot to how we as clinicians understand this. We've seen the mental conflict, but these crises are never just mental, are they? They're absolutely felt in the body. Let's start there, the biological side.
Yeah, the body keeps the score, right?
Right.
What's the physical toll for someone like Betty?
It's significant. You see things like sleep disturbances. And it's not just general anxiety keeping her awake. It's often ruminative thinking. Her mind is just churning. Replaying arguments, revisiting historical facts late at night, her brain stays activated, preventing that deep restorative sleep needed for emotional balance.
And those lifestyle changes. You mentioned the coffee, maybe alcohol, they symbolize freedom, but they also impact her system.
They do. Clinically, we see them affecting her body's natural regulation. Her nervous system used to be kind of co-regulated, you could say, by the predictable rhythms of her religious community. Hymns, rituals, a shared structure. It was soothing, predictable.
Okay.
Now, it's more reliant on self-administered jolts. The caffeine for energy, maybe alcohol to wind down. And think about the shift from that communal calm to the constant hits of dopamine and adrenaline, from online debates, from moral outrage. It's a totally different neurochemical landscape.
That sounds incredibly taxing, like running on adrenaline fumes.
It is. This sustained high alert state drains the adrenal system. It keeps cortisol levels elevated. Over time, this can contribute to things like chronic low-grade inflammation. The body is essentially interpreting ideological conflict as a physical threat.
Wow. So the internal war is literally making her physically run down. How does this show up psychologically beyond the fatigue?
Psychologically, Betty's interesting. She shows high cognitive complexity. She can observe her own thoughts and feelings, narrate her experience, even use humor, which is a sophisticated coping mechanism. That's a real strength. But she's caught in this classic post-deconstruction paradox. She gained intellectual freedom, rational autonomy, but she lost that sense of spiritual containment, the safety of the known. She escaped the box, but now she's standing under this huge, sometimes terrifyingly open sky.
And this is where the concept of moral injury comes in. Can you break that down simply?
Yeah, absolutely. Moral injury isn't just grief or sadness. It's a specific kind of psychological wound. It happens when you've participated in or witnessed or failed to prevent actions that go against your deepest moral beliefs.
How does that apply to Betty?
In a couple of ways. First, there's the betrayal by the institution. Feeling harmed by supporting something she now sees as unethical or hypocritical. That's a moral shock. Second, there can be guilt or grief about her own past actions or beliefs. Maybe promoting ideas she now realizes caused harm, or judging others based on standards she no longer holds.
So it's sadness for losing that sense of innocent belonging, but also maybe guilt about her own part in it all.
Exactly. That complexity is key. And it helps explain why that atheist me can be so fierce. It's partly a defense against that deep moral pain. She's trying to rebuild her identity, no longer a child of God, but not quite settled into something new yet. Maybe citizen of the cosmos, but that feels vast and undefined.
And this rebuilding is happening in a really complex social world for her.
Hugely complex. Socially, she's incredibly adept. Actually, she's fluent in both languages, you could say. She knows the insider language of her former faith, the culture, the expectations, but she's also mastered the language of secular critique.
That sounds like constant code switching.
It is mentally taxing, for sure. But that ability to navigate both worlds is also what allows for growth. It forces integration.
Can developmental theories help us map this journey, like James Fowler's stages of faith?
Fowler's work is really useful here. He saw faith, and he defined faith broadly as how we make meaning developing across our lives. Betty seems to be moving into what he called the conjunctive faith stage.
Okay, break that down. Conjunctive faith.
Think of it like this. A child's faith might be simple, literal, stage 1. An adolescent or young adult might develop a more structured, rule-bound faith, maybe tied to an institution, stage 3. When someone like Betty starts questioning that structure critically, demanding personal accountability, that's often stage 4. the individuative reflective stage.
And conjunctive is after that.
Yes, stage 5. Conjunctive faith is where you start to embrace paradox. You realize life is messy, full of contradictions, mystery. Instead of needing everything to fit neatly, you accept the tensions. You can hold opposing ideas without needing one to win. For Betty, this means she doesn't have to choose between atheist me and humanist me. She can learn to integrate them. Contradiction becomes texture, not a threat.
That's a really powerful reframe. The chaos isn't failure, it's movement towards maturity. What about Erik Erikson's stages? Where does she fit in adult development?
She's smack in the middle of generativity versus stagnation. This is typically mid-adulthood. The core task is contributing something meaningful, raising kids, mentoring, creating, impacting society. For Betty, the shift is where she finds that generative purpose.
Not from divine commands anymore.
Exactly. Now it's rooted in human connection, her own authenticity, maybe her social justice work. She's finding purpose in modeling integrity, an ethical engagement with the world as she now understands it. The risk is getting stuck in stagnation, just being bitter or critical about the past. Her challenge is to use her new freedom to build and contribute.
Okay, let's bring this right into the therapy room. For clinicians or those studying, how do we frame this? What's the core presenting problem?
Fundamentally, Betty is presenting with chronic existential tension. It's this ongoing dissonance between her critical mind and her empathetic heart. And it's not just abstract, it manifests as irritability, mental fatigue. She's just worn out from managing this internal polarity.
And the trigger, the thing that kicked this all off, the precipitating event?
It seems to be that exposure to historical information and social policies within her former faith that she found deeply troubling, particularly around gender issues, LGBTQ plus exclusion. It wasn't just information, it was a moral earthquake for her. Her words, again, it blew her mind. And the universe looked a whole lot bigger. That intellectual stressor unleashed the emotional fallout.
What keeps her stuck in that tension now, the maintaining factors?
Several things contribute. One is the online world. While it offers validation, those online debates often just ramp up the moral outrage, keeping her sympathetic nervous system fired up. It reinforces the fight mode.
Okay, what else?
There's likely unresolved ambivalence towards her family who still believe. That love plus disagreement is a constant source of stress, sometimes forcing her to hide parts of herself. And crucially, there's a cognitive identification with the label atheist.
How is that a maintaining factor?
Because she seems to have fused with it as a rigid stance, almost a combative identity. Rather than seeing atheist as just a description of her current lack of theistic belief, it's become a role she has to defend. Therapy needs to help soften that identification, make it more flexible.
This brings us to diagnosis. Critically important for NCE prep, but also for ensuring we don't pathologize a normal, albeit difficult, human process. Why isn't this just depression or anxiety?
That's the key question. The most appropriate way to frame this clinically is using a contextual code from the DSM-5-TR Z65.8 religious or spiritual problem.
Why that specific code?
Because it acknowledges that the primary issue bringing her to therapy is a crisis of meaning, belief, or spiritual identity, not necessarily a mental disorder in the typical sense. It legitimizes her struggle. It says your pain is real. It's related to this massive shift in your worldview, and it's understandable, not pathological. It avoids labeling disbelief as illness.
Are there other diagnoses we might consider, even just to rule out?
Sure. You might briefly consider F43.21, adjustment disorder with mixed disturbance of emotions and conduct. Her irritability, her emotional reactivity they could fit as a response to the stressor of losing her faith identity. But usually adjustment disorder implies a more acute difficulty coping. Betty seems to be functioning relatively well, albeit with significant distress. It's more of a chronic transition.
What about depression, the fatigue, the feeling down part of her allegory?
Definitely need to screen for that. F32.0, major depressive episode, mild or even persistent depressive disorder, dysthymia. We look for sustained low mood, loss of interest, significant changes in sleep or appetite, feelings of worthlessness that go beyond the spiritual questioning. Her humor can mask some of this, so careful assessment is needed.
But the overall picture?
The overall picture is best seen as spiritual disorientation with emerging integration. It's a process, a challenging, painful process that requires support, but not necessarily a fixed illness.
That framing is crucial for ethical practice, too. Let's hit the ethical corner. What ACA Code of Ethics principles are paramount here?
Number 1 is 8.4b, personal values. The therapist must remain value neutral regarding her beliefs or lack thereof. Unconditional acceptance is non-negotiable. Our job isn't to guide her towards or away from any belief system. It's about supporting her process, her values, her well-being. We have to bracket our own views entirely.
And recognizing the cultural piece.
Absolutely essential. That falls under E.5b, cultural sensitivity. Leaving a high-demand faith isn't just changing beliefs, it's often a massive cultural upheaval. Losing community, family dynamics shifting, losing a shared language, shared rituals. The therapist has to grasp the depth of that cultural loss to truly understand the client's grief and disorientation. Underestimate that, and you miss a huge part of the picture. Okay, so given this picture identity crisis, meaning-making, emotional pain, which therapeutic approaches offer the most help, humanistic and existential frameworks are really strong contenders here. Let's start with Carl Rogers and person-centered therapy.
Rogers' whole focus was the therapeutic relationship itself, right? How would he view Betty's internal battle?
Rogers would likely see that atheist me versus humanist me fight as a state of incongruence. There's a gap between her ideal self, who her upbringing and former faith perhaps implicitly demanded she be, maybe suppressing doubt, anger, and her experienced self, who she actually is now, full of critical questions and a strong sense of personal integrity. That split is her way of managing the discomfort of that gap.
So the therapy isn't about fixing her, but creating conditions for her to integrate.
Exactly. Rogers identified 3 core conditions: empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard, UPR. The institution might have withdrawn acceptance when she doubted. Therapy offers the opposite. By genuinely reflecting both her fierce critique and her deep empathy without judgment, the therapist provides that UPR.
And that allows her own growth tendency to emerge.
Precisely. Rogers called it the actualizing tendency, this innate human drive towards wholeness, growth, autonomy. Betty's intelligence and self-awareness show it's already active. Therapy just provides the safe, non-judgmental space needed for that tendency to flourish, for her to trust herself again.
Okay, that covers self-acceptance. Now, if we shift to existential therapy, looking at thinkers like Irvin Yalom or Viktor Frankl, this zooms out to the bigger questions, doesn't it?
It does. Existential therapy confronts those fundamental human concerns that get exposed when a belief system crumbles. Frankl talked about the existential vacuum, that feeling of emptiness or lack of purpose, when a prepackaged meaning system disappears.
And her internal conflict, the atheist versus humanist, reflects those existential tensions.
Beautifully, yes. You could see the atheist me grappling with isolation, the potential meaninglessness of a vast, indifferent universe. That brings anxiety. The humanist me strives for connection, which is a primary way we create meaning in the face of that potential void.
So her struggle is fundamentally about finding meaning after the old source disappeared.
Yalom and Frankl would say yes. She has to transition from having meaning given to her by dogma to actively creating meaning herself. Frankl's insight is powerful here. Meaning isn't found in a book of rules. It's forged through love, through confronting suffering courageously, like her grief, and through meaningful work, like her activism. Therapy helps build the courage to live with uncertainty, knowing her worth is inherent, not conditional on belief.
Those are powerful frameworks. Let's get practical, too. What about acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, developed by Stephen Hayes? It seems very focused on skills.
ACT is incredibly useful here because it directly addresses that feeling of being stuck. ACT sees a core part of the problem as cognitive fusion. Betty isn't just having atheist thoughts. She is the atheist, fused with that label and the rigidity it implies for her.
And the goal of ACT is?
Psychological flexibility. The ability to feel difficult things, think difficult thoughts, and still move towards what truly matters to you.
How does it help her unfuse from those labels?
A key technique is cognitive diffusion. Learning to step back and observe your thoughts as thoughts, rather than as literal truths or commands. So instead of, I am furious and judgmental about the church's history, it becomes, okay, there's the thought about the church's history again. And there's that familiar feeling of judgment arising.
Like noticing clouds passing in the sky, not being the cloud itself.
Exactly that metaphor. It creates space. You notice the thought, name it. The torching hypocrisy thought. Acknowledge the feeling it brings, but you don't have to automatically obey it or let it define you in that moment.
But wait, you said she has high cognitive complexity. She can analyze her thoughts. Why does she still get fused?
That's a great question. Sometimes high intelligence can actually reinforce fusion. Her analytical mind is brilliant at finding evidence to justify the outrage, right? Which feels validating, but keeps her stuck in that reactive fused state. ACT isn't about arguing with the thought's validity. It's about changing your relationship to the thought.
Through values.
Yes. Values clarification is central. ACT helps her connect with her core, chosen values that transcend any label, things like love, curiosity, fairness, connection, integrity. These become her compass.
So the values guide her actions, even when the thoughts are noisy.
Precisely. That's committed action. If a core value is respectful connection, she can choose to act in line with that value. Example, listen respectfully to a family member, even while noticing thoughts screaming about their illogical beliefs. That ability to feel the discomfort and act on values, that is psychological flexibility, moving from needing certainty to living with integrity.
This really brings us to the heart of the rewiring theme. This whole transition isn't just in her head, it's deeply physiological. It's happening in her nervous system. Let's dive into polyvagal theory from Stephen Porges.
Absolutely. Polyvagal theory gives us such a useful map for understanding how our nervous system shapes our experience of safety, connection, and threat. Think of it like having different gears or states your nervous system can be in.
Okay, what are the gears?
The top gear, the ideal state for connection, is the ventral vagal complex, VVC. This is your social engagement system. When Betty feels safe, seen, understood, maybe connecting with her husband, having a truly open dialogue, her VVC is online. Heart rate is calm, she can read facial cues, feel empathy. This is the physiological state of humanist me.
And when that system is offline?
If she encounters something that feels like a threat, ideological disagreement, online attacks, maybe even just remembering past hurts the VVC can shut down, she drops into the next gear, sympathetic activation. Fight or flight.
That's the atheist me mobilizing.
That's the physiology of it, yes. Alertness, defensiveness, mobilization. Heart rate increases, muscles tense. Her body is preparing to attack the perceived threat, the hypocrisy, the dogma, or defend her new hard-won identity. She's perpetually braced for impact.
And you mentioned earlier her history makes ideological difference feel like a threat to belonging?
Crucially, yes. In many high-demand groups, being wrong or disagreeing isn't just an intellectual error. Historically or culturally, it could mean ostracism, exile. Her nervous system likely learned to equate ideological nonconformity with profound danger. So reading history isn't just reading history. Her body might be reacting as if she's about to be kicked out of the tribe.
Wow. No wonder the anger feels so visceral and persistent. It's a survival response stuck on. What about the long-term cost of that? You mentioned psychoneuroimmunology.
Right. That's the field studying the interaction between our psychology, our nervous system, and our immune system. When Betty is chronically stuck in that sympathetic fight-flight state, fueled by moral outrage, her system is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol.
And that wears the body down.
It does. What feels like righteous energy is physiologically costly. Sustained high cortisol can suppress immune function, interfere with digestion, disrupt sleep further. She might be more prone to getting sick, take longer to heal, feel that deep bone weariness. Her immune system is essentially misinterpreting ideological battles as physical threats it needs to constantly fight.
That really lands the feeling down part of her allegory. The intellectual win came at a huge physiological price.
And neurologically, think about Anil Seth's idea of consciousness as a controlled hallucination. Her former religious worldview provided a very stable, collectively reinforced hallucination or predictive model of reality. It told her how the world worked, what was safe, what mattered.
And its collapse wasn't just an idea changing.
No, it was a neural destabilization. The brain's entire predictive model got shattered. That's profoundly anxiety-provoking. It creates hypervigilance, that desperate need for some kind of certainty, even if it's the certainty of outrage, because the brain is scrambling to build a new, stable map of reality.
Okay, so if the problem is so deeply embodied, the solution has to be too, right? We can't just talk her out of it. How do we use neuroplasticity for healing?
Exactly. Healing has to happen through the body, reprogramming the nervous system. We start with somatic awareness, helping her learn to notice the actual physical sensations before they escalate. Simple things, tracking the breath, noticing heat rising in the chest, tension in the jaw, interoception, tuning into the internal landscape.
Becoming aware of the wave before it crashes.
Precisely. And the goal isn't to stop the wave, but to learn to surf the sympathetic wave. Can she feel that anger, that anxiety rising, notice the physical sensations, and choose a different response? Maybe a conscious breath, maybe just pausing instead of reacting immediately.
And doing that actually rewires the brain.
Yes. Each time she feels that activation and consciously brings her ventral vagal system back online, even slightly through breath, self-compassion, grounding, she strengthens that pathway. She's using neuroplasticity to teach her body implicitly that disagreement doesn't equal annihilation, that she can be safe within herself even amidst uncertainty, making her body a refuge, not a battleground.
So Pulling all this together, the incongruence, the moral injury, the dysregulated nervous system, what does this look like in actual therapy sessions? How do we translate theory into practical help?
A huge part of therapy's role here is providing a relationship where Betty can relearn trust. Trust in others, but maybe even more importantly, trust in herself. The therapist acts as a secure base. Because her deconstruction likely involved feelings of betrayal or judgment, the therapy relationship must be the opposite. Safe, steady, non-dogmatic, unconditionally accepting. It models a different way of relating.
You talked about anger as a signal. How do you work with that intense moral outrage without just trying to shut it down?
You follow it. You get curious about it. Help Betty trace the feeling back. Where does she feel it in her body? What specific incident triggered it? And crucially, what core value is that anger trying fiercely to protect? Justice, fairness, truth, integrity.
So transforming indignation into insight.
Exactly. When she sees the anger is connected to a deeply held value, it changes the relationship to it. It's not just being angry, it's my commitment to fairness is being activated. This helps her differentiate between, say, cognitive safety needing to be intellectually right and embodied safety feeling fundamentally okay and grounded, even when things are complex or uncertain.
What about the loss of structure and ritual that came with leaving her faith? That leaves a void too, doesn't it?
It really does. Humans seem to thrive on rhythm and structure, so we might explore ways to reintroduce secular ritual. This isn't about forcing woo-woo stuff on her, but finding conscious, structured practices that provide grounding and meaning for her. It could be anything, really. Maybe structured journaling time focused on gratitude or values, maybe mindful walking in nature, creative visualization related to her goals, even just establishing consistent daily or weekly rhythms that mark time and provide a sense of stability, replacing the structure that was lost. It's about creating personal rituals of coherence.
Okay, let's name some specific interventions drawn from the frameworks we've discussed.
One would be narrative reauthoring, right? Helping her shift the story she tells herself about this whole process.
Absolutely. Maybe her current story feels like, I was fooled, I failed, I fell. Narrative work helps her reframe it. Perhaps as an initiation into authenticity or a journey towards integrity, highlighting the strengths she showed: courage, curiosity, resilience, making her the active, heroic protagonist of her own evolution, not just a victim of circumstance.
And tackling that black and white thinking. Yes, using something like compassion-focused cognitive restructuring. Gently challenging those polarized thoughts. All believers are blind. All skeptics are arrogant. We work towards both-hand thinking. I can find this doctrine harmful and understand why this person I love finds comfort in it. Fostering complexity and nuance reduces the internal pressure to pick a side and attack the other.
And just explaining the developmental models can be therapeutic.
Hugely. That psychoeducation on faith development, using Fowler's stages, for instance. When you explain that the confusion and paradox she feels are actually signs of moving into a more mature, complex stage, conjunctive faith, it's incredibly validating. It normalizes the struggle, reduces shame, and gives her a map for the territory she's in. Oh, this chaos is actually growth. That's powerful.
Lastly, for people listening who might relate to Betty's experience, when is it time to say, okay, I need some professional support with this? What are the signs?
I think the biggest sign is when your nervous system is clearly signaling distress persistently. It's gone beyond intellectual wrestling. So things like chronic anger or irritability that's damaging relationships, deep emotional exhaustion or cynicism, frequent anxiety or even panic attacks related to these themes of morality or meaning, feeling constantly misunderstood or having communication breakdowns with loved ones, or just withdrawing from people because navigating the world feels too draining.
So when the internal struggle starts significantly impacting your functioning and well-being.
Exactly. Reaching out for therapy in this context isn't admitting defeat. It often marks a shift from constantly fighting for an identity to finding support and learning how to simply inhabit one with all its complexities.
Okay, let's quickly recap for students preparing for the NCE. What are the absolute must-know concepts from Betty's case?
First, understand Z codes, especially Z65.8, religious or spiritual problem. Know why it's used to capture significant distress related to belief-meaning systems without pathologizing the person. Distinguishing process from pathology is key.
Second, the mind-body connection is crucial. Polyvagal theory, Porges. Understand the basics of the three states: ventral vagal, safe social; sympathetic fight-flight; dorsal vagal, shutdown; and how our nervous system constantly assesses safety, especially in relation to social and ideological cues.
Third, from ACT, know psychological flexibility. That ability to stay present, open up to difficult feelings, and act on your values. And the core skill of cognitive diffusion, learning to observe thoughts without being dominated by them.
Don't forget moral injury. Recognizing that specific type of wound related to perceived ethical transgressions or betrayals by institutions or oneself. And from the humanistic side, Rogers' concept of unconditional positive regard, its vital role in fostering self-acceptance and integration.
For deeper dives, definitely revisit the original thinkers. Rogers on Becoming a Person, Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning, Hayes' books on ACT, Porges on polyvagal theory, and Fowler's Stages of Faith. They provide the foundations.
Which brings us back beautifully to where we started that metaphor, infants on thrones. It really does capture Betty's journey, doesn't it?
It does. The throne was that rigid structure of certainty, the ideology, the belief system she was raised in. Secure, maybe, but limiting.
And the infant.
That's the core self underneath. Raw, vulnerable, curious, capable of empathy. The part that awakens when the old structure falls away. Betty's journey isn't about destroying herself, it's about rewiring. It's neuroplasticity in action.
Learning new ways of being, new rhythms.
Exactly. Learning that true belonging, true safety, isn't found in conforming to an external authority or having all the answers. It's cultivated internally. It's rooted in her own coherence, the growing strength and flexibility of her own nervous system, her ventral vagal capacity for connection and self-compassion.
Every time she chooses dialogue over diatribe, empathy over outrage, complexity over certainty, she's strengthening that internal foundation.
And perhaps Betty's story hints at something larger. Maybe humanity's own evolution involves developing nervous systems that are resilient enough to hold difference, ideological, spiritual, you name it, without defaulting to fear, exclusion, or collapse. Learning to be okay with the uncertainty.
Yeah, and maybe that's what it means for all of us to be infants on thrones. And with that, the AI Puppet Show endeth. We sound pretty lifelike, don't we? Our puppet master used to play games like these with speak and spells. Now, where is that little girl's voice?
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.